it. But now let's in fact take a closer look at the Supreme Court's interim order. I'll be going over to the big wall over there and speaking exactly about this interim order, what has been stated in terms of this. There are several issues that have been highlighted in this as well. Obviously, now the Supreme Court has stated, and there are certain provisions that are still yet to be discussed. But for now, I'll be talking about Supreme Court's interim order, which has been stated in terms of the ongoing Waqf Amendment Act. Firstly, provision number 1, person should be a practitioner of Islam for 5 years to create a waqf, which we know now the Supreme Court has stated, but the provision number 1 is that in terms of the 5 years of practicing Islam, provision number 1 again is state governments frame rules regarding determination of the condition. So right now the framework is yet to be decided in terms of what it means of deciding this factor of the 5 years of practicing Islam. Provision number 2, designated officer of the government to decide dispute on whether a waqf property has encroached upon a government property. So that's another provision number 2 in terms of this. Provision number 2, an extension of that is Supreme Court observes executive officer cannot be permitted to adjudicate rights of personal citizens. So that's another provision that has been in terms of the order of Supreme Court, the interim order of the Waqf Amendment Act. And another provision to take into consideration that Supreme Court has talked about is the nomination of non-Muslim members to the Waqf board. So this is something of a point of contention in terms of the Muslim community. Provision number 3, SC observes that as far as possible, the ex officio member of the board should be Muslim. So another provision to take into consideration. Provision number 3, Supreme Court has said the Central Waqf Council should not consist more than 4 non-Muslim members. So this has been the talk about the 4 non-Muslim members. Another point to notice is State Waqf Board should not consist of more than 3 non-Muslim members. Another point to notice about in terms of the 3 non-Muslim members. So we have been holding this conversation for quite some time in terms of the Supreme Court's interim order. There are several provisions that have been enlisted in terms of that when we are talking about it. Some of them the Supreme Court has flagged that will arbitrary exercise of power that has been paused. The bench of Chief Justice of India B.R. Gavai and Justice A.G. has said that found that no case was made out to stay the whole thing, but some sections need some protection. Now my question to Jasmine is, Jasmine, in terms of this flagging the sweeping powers that have been granted to a district collector in the new law, the court said the collector cannot be permitted to adjudicate the rights of personal citizens, and this will violate the separation of powers. Until adjudication happens by the tribunal, no third-party rights can be created against any party, and the provision dealing with such powers to the collector shall remain state. When we're talking about this, what exactly does this mean when we're talking about arbitrary exercise of power?
When we talk about separation of powers under the Constitution, there has been a clear separation of powers between judiciary, each branch, administrative, judiciary, legislative, there's a clear separation. Now, by having the collector to decide this issue, which actually talks about religious properties, we are encroaching, we are permitting an encroachment of jurisdiction. So to that extent, to say that this person is not authorized to get into this aspect is upholding the constitutional mandate. Because after all, one of the main issues was, there was just a couple of issues I'll read out. First and foremost, whether it is in contravention to the Waqf Act of 1995. Second was whether there has to be a demonstrative practice of Islam for at least 5 years, that we know that there are rules need to be formulated for it. Whether the Waqf by user is discriminatory, that now has to be seen, and there has to be evidence of title, and whether inclusion of non-Muslims violates. Now, when you have the collector actually go into examining the issue, he's not a competent authority under law, because the tribunal, it is only the tribunals who will decide this issue. To that extent, the role of the collector, who is an arm of the state government, will have to be curtailed to that extent that he does not encroach, is what it means.